Welcome back to Warrior Servant Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Pat Welsh. Today we have a great guest that I have a lot in common with, uh, Steve Gallegos. And Steve, I'll apologize in advance. I already told you my Spanish sucks, so correct me on pronunciation when need be. Uh, Steve and I are both naturalized citizens. Um, Became U.S. citizens. I did as a child. Steve's going to share a little bit of his story. And oddly, we're both former cops and both lawyers. So Steve has an incredible story, and I love how he tells. He was so good, he got the President of the United States to make him a citizen. So, Steve, welcome to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast, and tell us a little bit about your background because it's fascinating.
Pat, first of all, thank you for inviting me on the show and having me and introducing me to your audience. I know that what you do is not simple. You make it look easy, but hosting a podcast and rounding up your guests, I'm sure a lot of times it feels like herding cats. And so I just want to acknowledge you for what you do and for bringing such beautiful guests and such beautiful information out to an audience that really needs, a positive word these days. They need inspiration, encouragement, and support wherever they can get it. And you're one of those guys that's giving your time to do this. And so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Kind words. So, 17 years old,
Mm,
jumping, yeah, and
you want to
become a
go there?
Marine, but yeah, but well, or tell us about how you ended up here in the United States and then your journey to today being a lawyer in the Denver metro area and all that. It's a great success story that a lot of people don't get to hear about and share.
It is a fascinating story and quite timely for um, today's today's marketplace, right? Because you see a lot of things happening out in the world today with immigration and people that gave up everything essentially to leave their home countries, their families, their relatives, their friends, their work in order to come and create a new experience for themselves, whether or not they found what we might identify as the American dream or not. Every individual has their own interpretation of what that might mean for them. But I recall as a child arriving into the United States legally at 7 years old. I had no perception of who I was, much less that I was chasing anything, much less an American dream. My father did, though. He was an accountant with one of the big eight firms at the time, and in Chile. I was born in Chile, and so he was an accountant, certified public accountant, and his dream was always to bring the family to the United States. And so we did that. We went from Chile to Venezuela to Puerto Rico, and then from Puerto Rico, he was able to get an assignment in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so I landed in Minneapolis, stayed there maybe a year or so before we moved to Chicago. And in Chicago is really where I set up my roots at 7, 8 years old, and learned a lot about life. Essentially, I became a thug. I became a thug. I was in the south side of Chicago, Pat, and I know that the Welsh clan are not new to fighting,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And so you can probably relate to this too, along with the other things that we have between us that are relatable. But yeah, growing up on the streets of Chicago, and a new kid on not only in the block but to this country barely speaking the language. You needed to use your fists in order to survive on those streets, and I had to do that. So I learned to fight early on, and as my language got better, I was better able to communicate and build relationship with the other kids as opposed to fighting them first. But you learn to defend yourself. But you know, part of the reason that I was a fighter too is because I was myself frustrated. I didn't know who I was or what value I had to the world, largely because of my upbringing. My parents viewed me as a good for nothing. In fact, that's what they called me, among hundreds of other names. And the physical beatings and the mental abuse were one thing, but what really I think made a significant negative impact on me was the lack of indifference by which I was treated and by which I was seen. And so, as a result of that, we get to the age of 17 where I tried several times to take my life because I just didn't believe that I belonged here, that I had a place here. And it wasn't a voice I heard, but there was just like this knowing inside that I needed to make a different decision. And so I did. And I ended up taking my life, but not in the traditional suicidal sense. I took my life away from my parents and the other adults whose influence I was under, that led me to believe and programmed me to believe that I was good for nothing and worthless. And I took my life and joined the Marine Corps. I gave it to the Marine Corps right at 17 years of age. And talk about jumping from the frying pan into the fire, right? But what was good about that experience initially is that the drill instructors didn't have to work real hard to break me down into nothing so they could mold me back up again because I was already there, right? It just took a little push and boom, I'm done. And so, fascinating story. It was, and this was completely unexpected. There were three other individuals in my Marine Corps boot camp that were primarily Spanish speaking. And as a result of that challenge, they were not able to uh, keep abreast of the academic portion of the training as well as they should. So they were in the process of failing. But because I was fluent in Spanish, it's my first language, of course, I decided to help these guys, tutor them essentially. Nobody asked me to do it, no one suggested it. I just decided these guys need help. I can help them. And so at night, we would go into the showers after everybody had gone to sleep and they turned all the lights out in the squad bay. The four of us would go sit on the cold, damp tile shower floors. And there I would go over that day's material and I would translate it from English to Spanish. And we would have a discussion about it so that I knew that they understood the material. About 2 weeks into this process, and that must have been about 2:30 in the morning or so. I mean, one of the drill instructors, the on-duty drill instructor, woke up and he heard voices coming from the showers. Now, I'll let you, Pat, let your imagination run wild. What could that drill instructor have thought about hearing voices from the shower at 2:30 in the morning? Right? A bunch of 17-year-old pimply-faced kids, up to no good, of course. So he comes in like he's going to take down an enemy stronghold all by himself, right? Yelling and cussing and just creating a storm all by himself. And after we picked up ourselves off the floor, and I stood up and I said, and he asked us to explain ourselves. And I said, sir, and I explained what we were doing. He kind of like, turned from that wolf that was just about to have a bunch of sheep for dinner, like incredible look on his face. And he said, carry on. And so we did, we carried on. Fast forward, the end of boot camp, we take our final exam. I score number one in the class. My three friends score in the top 10. What that led me to was being named the platoon honor man, which is the equivalent of valedictorian,
Yeah.
being given my first rank to private first class, being given the beautiful Marine dress blue uniform, right? And essentially being honored not for being the strongest, the fastest. I did okay, but there were other guys that were way bigger and stronger than I am. It's because I had taken my eyes off myself to help these other guys for no other reason than I wanted to help them. And so my philosophy early on in life was developed from that experience, which is I achieved my dreams helping others achieve theirs. And that's really how I've lived my life. And I've transitioned from career to what I do now, which is public speaking and helping individuals, professionals, public figures master three areas, which are self mastery, which is essentially how you think, how you act, and then relationship mastery, how you relate to yourself, and then how you relate to the marketplace, and then communication mastery, which is how you speak to yourself as well as how you speak to the marketplace. Because I think those are the three pillars: self mastery, relationships, and communications that will determine your trajectory in life, whether it's successful or not successful, whether you be fulfilled or not fulfilled, whether you be happy or miserable. Those are the three pillars on which everything we do, Pat,
Hmm.
is based, right? We need to think, make decisions, and then act on those decisions. You and I need to relate to one another. How do we do that? Through words, through communication, through body language, right? Through our stories. And then, that's how we move forward in life. If we want to date someone, if we want to get a career, a certain job, we want investors to come into our lives, we need to be able to have mastery in those three areas. And so that's what I do now. I get to do that in addition to still practicing law. I work on referral only, and I have a few cases that I handle, but mostly I spend my time writing and coaching and looking to do a lot more of that.
That's awesome. That is awesome. It kind of reminds me, in a way, because the whole warrior servant leader ethos that I talk about, your three categories, we're almost talking about the same thing, but we've just renamed them. And I bet you didn't even know when you're joining the Marine Corps that exactly what you just shared and did was you had that warrior mindset of standing up, showing up, and defending what you believed. And part of what you believed was that servant mindset of putting the wants and needs of others before your own. And you were going to stand up and defend that and put three other fellows' careers before your own, even that you're trying to build them into success. And those two combined are the exact example of that's being a leader, a person of impact and influence in the lives of others. Now, you came out of the Vietnam era, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this was at a time when joining the Marine Corps was not exactly a badge of honor with people of your age range and whatnot, and everything going on with Vietnam. I mean, I remember all those things too. And coming home was for a lot of Vietnam soldiers was not a pleasant experience.
No, it wasn't.
So, what were some of the challenges that you've have faced? So you get out of the Marines and go to college then, or I mean, how did you end up going to law school?
That's another fascinating journey, part of the journey. After the Marine Corps, well, going back just a little bit to my time as a child, as I said, I was named good for nothing, and because I couldn't do anything right in the eyes of my parents, not English, math, science, nothing that I did in school, except for when I opened my mouth to sing, Pat, the whole world stopped. They listened and they applauded. So you can imagine at 5, 6, 7 years old, me being, a young, impressionable kid and seeing this, right? I try and do my schoolwork and I get the crap beat out of me, get the crap beat out of me at home for what I thought there was no reason. And so the more that you call a kid good for nothing or stupid or idiot or whatever labels
Hmm.
you want to put on them, the more of that he or she will become. So parents listening, please take heed in that, right? What you call them, they will become. So the more I was referred to as good for nothing, the more good for nothing I became. And I got even more frustrated because I'm asking my parents, well, you planted a lemon tree and you're upset because it doesn't produce peaches, right? It just it didn't
Yeah,
make sense to me.
yeah.
And so I was like, what is going on here? Um, but when I opened my mouth to sing, there was a talent, a gift that I was given that saved my life. Because when I did open my mouth to sing, even my parents stopped and they would marvel and they would awe, and my mother would have me come and sing for the neighbor ladies when they'd come over for tea and those kinds of things. And so as a kid, I thought that singing was a way to respect, admiration, right,
Mm-hmm.
from others, right? Because that's, and so I went on a search for that. As a young child, I set my sights on becoming the modern day Julio Iglesias. I don't know if you know the name Julio.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
But, half the world knows who he is,
Yeah.
especially the ladies that are listening. Depending on what age group they're in, because a lot of them will go, "What? Who? We know who Taylor Swift is, but I don't know who Taylor. I know her name, but I don't know her music, sadly." Um, so that's what I wanted to do. So in the Marine Corps, another fun story. I'm sitting in the squad bay one night, playing my guitar for my group of fellow Marines. This was out of boot camp now. We're in Hawaii. And that was my first duty station. And I'm singing. We're singing, songs from the Eagles, the Beatles, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And from the front of the squad bay, we hear the sergeant, turn that effing radio off. And so my buddies kept saying, no, 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 keep singing, right? They prompted me to keep singing. So I kept singing. And then all of a sudden, the sergeant, you hear him storming down the squad. I said, turn that effing radio off. And then when he came to the section of the squad bay where we were, he
Yeah.
looks at me and says, Gallegos, that's you? And so that particular sergeant got me my first really professional gig at a nightclub in Kailua, Hawaii. And I started singing there. And man, the audience just loved it, right? It was a, you know, again, Beatles type, that kind of singer-songwriter type music that I was singing, and also singing in Spanish, which of course they went crazy for. I don't know why, but they did. And so that started me on my journey of becoming a professional singer. So once I got out of the Marine Corps 4 years later, I moved to Los Angeles in order to pursue that career, right? That was my sole focus. And I'll be honest with you, Pat, it wasn't because I wanted fame and fortune. It wasn't because I wanted to be on stage in front of millions of adoring fans and sell millions of records. No, because I learned early in the process that I didn't like the lack of privacy, right? I didn't like a lot of the things that went in to becoming and exposing yourself and putting yourself, showing your vulnerability and placing your hands, or your life literally in the hands of other individuals who could, you know, have their way with you, and they tried, or advance your career if you were willing to trade favors, right?
Right.
A lot of that happened. And so, uh, I had to come to terms, and now I'm a lawyer, and I'm still pursuing my singing career in LA, practicing entertainment law. And the reason I got into law is because while I was a police officer, I was working for the courts in Santa Barbara, California, as a courtroom bailiff. The judge that I worked for is a former entertainer. So he and I became friends. He kind of became my mentor. And he said, you know what? If you would apply yourself and go to law school, lawyers run the entertainment industry. So now you can open doors as a lawyer that you could never open as one in a million singer songwriter. I said, oh, Judge, that's awesome. And I can wear Armani suits also while pursuing my singing career, right? I mean, how many struggling singer songwriters wear Armani suits, right? So I was in, I went all in. So I went into, quit the sheriff's department, and I started studying school at night, and I parked cars for a living during the daytime, right? Because it allowed me to study and those kinds of things. And it was in that position, and it's funny how these things just all kind of weave together, and you don't know it at the time, but it was while I was parking cars that I got to meet President Reagan. Personally, ask him to help me become a citizen. Because another story, I was married at the time, Santa Barbara, California. My wife and I had gone to Mexico, as I suggested you do, right, for a long weekend. And this was back in the early 70s, no, 80s, when you could go to
Yeah.
Mexico cross the border from San Diego, and just have the time of your life for the weekend in terms of food and drink and music and all this stuff, right? And it was like you'd spend maybe 20, 25 bucks for a huge lobster meal with shrimp and, the whole bit, right? Now
Yeah.
it'll cost you 200, but back then it was really, really inexpensive and fun to do. So coming back across to the United States, the Border Patrol stops me and they asked me a very unique question. And because I was a law abiding citizen, police officer, and learning to be a lawyer at the time, I answered it correctly. And they said, "Where were you born? Not where do you live? Where do you reside? Where were you born?" And I said, "Chile." And so they said, "Let us see your ID." I didn't have my Chilean passport with me, but I did have this identification card of me when I was 7 years old with a bald head. And yeah, that was the picture. I said, "Here's my ID." And they kind of looked at it and said, "You got to be kidding me." So they pulled me over to secondary inspection. And long story short, they weren't going to let me back in the United States. They were going to throw me back to Mexico and say, "You can deal with it at the embassy when they open on Monday." And I'm like, "No, dude, I got to get back to work. You see, I got a badge and I'm a police officer, and it's legit. My credentials are real." Thankfully, I didn't carry my weapon with me at the time. I would have been in big trouble. So
Yeah.
anyway, so ultimately, I paid a fee there. They let me back into the United States, and they said, "You've got 2 weeks to clear this up." So I went to the INS station, got a temporary visa in my Chilean passport, good for 6 months. And during that process, I filled out the application to become a citizen. Didn't hear anything, didn't hear anything, didn't hear it. Months went by and I didn't hear anything from the immigration service that it was called back then about my citizenship. And so now the 6 month visa and my Chilean passport had expired. And so I have zero status. I am subject to deportation. So one day I'm working at the parking lot and we receive a phone call from the Secret Service and they want to hire our parking service to perform valet services for Nancy Reagan's birthday party. And if you remember at the time, Ronald and Nancy had the Western White House in Santa Barbara, California,
Hmm.
right? Wine country back there. So we got hired. I was one of the 4 individuals selected through a background check and everything to go and provide valet services for the President of the United States. Now, here I am, right? Um, I'm sure there were the Cheneys and the Bushes and just all kinds of people showing up there, right? Dignitaries from around the world who I didn't know, Colin Powell, but there was everybody who's anybody in politics back in the day.
Yeah.
During a break in that process, Pat, one of the agents came out and said, "The president would like to know if you want your photo taken with him." We said, "Darn right we do." They let us into the backyard of the White House, Western White House of Ronald and Nancy's house. We're waiting there, and here comes President Reagan, as big as life. I mean, he was a tall man. He was big. He was like John Wayne looking, right? If you ever imagine what
Hmm.
John Wayne would look like in real life, you're
Yeah.
looking up at this individual and saying, "This is Paul Bunyan kind of a man," right?
Yep.
And I'm, 5'9", right? I'm not short by any standards, but certainly I'm not however tall he was. So the agent had told us, "Just stand here, wait for the photographer to set up. Don't say anything to the president." Well, I don't follow the rules very well. My wife calls me a rule breaker because, I tend to break rules, not laws. I don't break laws necessarily, I break rules, which to me don't make sense because that's what, helps get you ahead in life. So become a rule breaker. Um, and so the president comes out before the photographer sets up. And so he says, "Well, do you have any questions for me?" And so rather than keep my mouth shut, I said, "Mr. President, I do have a question." And so in 30 seconds, a minute, I shared my situation. He said, "Write me a letter. And when I get back to the White House, I'll see what I can do. I'll take care of it." I didn't put a lot of faith in that because he was a politician. Excuse me. I didn't put a lot of faith in that because he's a politician, right? And he's a busy man. He doesn't have time to pay attention to me. But nonetheless, over the next 2 weeks or so, I compiled a letter and, with my credentials from the Marine Corps, from being a police officer, all these things, and a copy of my citizenship application. And I sent it to him. And then about a month and a half later, I'm at the parking lot and, "Hey, Steve, a call for you." I go, and the gentleman on the other end identifies himself as the deputy commissioner of the INS, in other words, second in charge of
Yeah.
the Immigration Service. And he says to me, President Reagan received your letter and he forwarded to us with instructions that we're supposed to follow through and make sure that your application is processed accordingly. Well, about a month later, I'm being sworn in as America's newest citizen and featured in the 4th of July parade in Santa Barbara, California, in my Marine Corps uniform, riding in the back of a 56 Chevy convertible, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
I'm just waving to the audience like this. And it was just so much fun, right? And the lesson I learned from that is that, hey, when the opportunity presents itself, open your mouth and ask for
Hmm.
whatever it is that you need, right? Of whoever it is. You got to do it the right way. But yeah, go to the top.
That is awesome story. Awesome story. And I never got to meet President Reagan personally, but I have the same experience with. I've been on the details for Bush 41, 43. What do you call it? President Clinton after he was out of office. President Obama, when he was the candidate, he'd won
Primaries.
the at the convention
Mhm.
and all that. His first stop was Dayton, Ohio, and it is amazing how what you think or see of them of politicians a lot of times in the media, and then you meet them in person. And I clearly remember Bush 43 is he would come off. He made a lot of trips to Dayton, Ohio. The Bosnia peace accords were signed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and so all sorts of stuff. And he would always come off Air Force One and would come over to where the uniform officers were posted up and thank them personally for being there and taking care of him. And honest to God, there was one time where, as he's walking towards one of the officers who had been there in a previous visit that he had made, he still remembered that guy's name, that
Oh
cop's
wow.
name, and called him out by name before he got close enough to see his name, played on his uniform. But I met Bush 41's Barbara Bush, incredible human being, and even President Clinton. It was after he was out of office, but I was the commander on a detail, and there was a veteran in a wheelchair that couldn't get up to the rope line, and the big dinner was over, and this, that, and the other thing was at the convention center, and he was a World War II veteran and a Vietnam veteran. It was wheeling him up to the curtain area where they had brought the car in to pick President Clinton up and leave. And I'm with the Secret Service lead, and then I'm the local lead, and the Vietnam guy goes, this is my friend. He really wanted to shake President Clinton's hand, and the Secret Service guy gets on the radio, talks to President Clinton's head of his personal detail, tells him what's going on, and Clinton was 50, 60 yards away from us, and he stopped. He was getting ready to get in the limo. He stops, comes over. He talks to this veteran for 30 minutes,
Oh wow.
and I just had a great conversation with him. So it's to hear that story about President Reagan is that's like that is so awesome, because that's how we really learn the integrity and the truth about people based on not what the media tells us, but what you personally have gotten to see.
Yeah.
Uh,
And our
and,
own filters too, Pat. I'm glad that you brought that up because much of my perception of the president today, the president yesterday, the president tomorrow, or, anyway, Hollywood celebrities is what our filters tell us. right?
Hmm.
That person is or isn't, and what that person is like or isn't, right? And it's influenced a lot by what we read and hear in the media, etc. Um, but if we could just stop to recognize that they are human beings just like we are, and they're afraid of something and
Hmm.
they want something like you do, right?
Yeah.
Like me, right? I want something and there's something I'm afraid of too, right? And so we all have that. So we all have that intrinsic just desire to be like, um, to love others and to do our best. Um, and often we fail to see that because of all of this outside information. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up.
All that noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do. When I got certified as a subject matter expert on interacting with people with disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and yeah, I had a younger cousin that was a breech birth and had brain damage and grew up. He was able eventually to be relatively independent, but otherwise, I didn't have any exposure to people who had disabilities, and once I started learning how to interact with them, the very same thing is they have they every human being has the same three basic desires, if you will, or needs, and safety, security, and prosperity. Uh, that that's kind of fundamentally what we want out of life. And like you say, when you're called a good for nothing nobody, then that negatively impacts what you think about safety, security, and prosperity. And I think it's
Absolutely.
funny that you said that's what your parents called you, and I immediately went to I helped arrest a 19-year-old for two murders in Dayton, Ohio. And his God given birth name on his birth certificate was Dial Capone Al Pacino.
Oh my goodness.
And it's like, talk about living up to your name, is that's what he was cursed with.
Right.
And and he had at his house, he had all the pictures, Scarface, and he had probably a $300 leather jacket that had the big Scarface and everything. And that's who he
Became
became, because that's what he was
programmed.
called.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you're called by name. And if you're if it's like, couldn't you name him Einstein or something that to live up to? But how often do we? I don't know about you. I went to law school because everybody goes, "Oh, you'll make a great lawyer." I really had no desire to be a lawyer. I grown up, I either wanted to be a cop or a high school basketball coach kind of deal.
Hmm.
But I not succumbed, but well, yeah, I did. I followed the expectations of other people had of me, but
To
in
be
a positive way. Oh, you'll be. Yeah, it wasn't a negative. You're a good for nothing. Is that aspire to that career and all that stuff, and I did, and I became a lawyer. And 4 years into it, I hated practicing law. I mean,
right.
I kept my license active, and I was a prosecutor. Uh, for 4 years. So I was putting bad guys away, but this wasn't my calling,
Exactly.
type
Yeah.
deal.
And
And
and I'm glad that you brought that experience up, Pat, because that illustrates another one of the things that I love teaching is that we we all need to learn and embrace the idea that we are not our stories, right?
mhm,
Number one, we are not the story. We are an actor in the story, but the big question becomes, whose script are you following? Because in your case, yeah, going to law school and becoming a lawyer, you know, so many people on this planet would love to have had that opportunity that
yep,
you did, right? But yet you get into it, you followed it because it was other people's, what you said, other people's expectations of you. It wasn't because you had this burning desire to become a lawyer. You agreed, you made the decision to, but it was more to appease them, right?
Hmm.
And maybe kind of resolve a little bit of the curiosity that you also had to, okay, hey, this might work out. Why not? It beats doing whatever else you might have been doing. Um, and so come to find out that you were dissatisfied with it. And so
Hmm.
you went into police work, which was more fulfilling and satisfying because there's
Hmm.
more action, there's more hands on. I can see why, right? Because there's more interaction with and opportunity to really make a difference um, one-on-one with people, whereas a
Yeah.
lawyer, you're kind of distanced and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a great point that you brought up is that we need to follow our own script.
Yeah. Well, and I think when we talked a couple weeks ago on the phone, it was just shortly after a 15-year-old kid. He was 15 when he died of leukemia. Born in 1991, died in 2006 in Milan, Italy. Was canonized in the Catholic Church as Saint Carlo Acutis, and his one of his most impactful statements he made and he's known for is this: we're all born unique, but sadly many of us die a photocopy. And
Mm,
I think like what you're sharing about be, becoming and discovering and becoming what you're called to do, not and be. I would tell cops this: if you couldn't be a police officer, what would you do? And if they would tell me, well, that's the only thing I know, what they've just told me is you define yourself by the job you're doing,
mhm,
and you don't have an identity. You don't that that you would be lost if you were not a police officer. That's not a good, healthy place to be. And what Saint Carlo Acutis says is so. I mean, throughout history, we remember, I'm a little bit younger than you, but not a whole lot. But, when Michael Jordan was so famous and everything, and it was always be like Mike, how many kids that became their motto is be like
right,
somebody else, not about being yourself
right.
and discovering what are the gifts and blessings that God, your creator, has given to you, and you're ignoring it because you want to be like somebody else. And that's pretty. That was really meaningful for me. And he just literally, it was September 7th, I think. It's just been about a month ago. He was canonized in Rome. So what were some of the biggest obstacles? I know you shared as far as coming over as a 7-year-old in language and neighborhood and stuff like that. In your adult or even today, what are some of the things that are obstacles you still have to crush and get focused on, and how do you do it?
That's another great question. What are the obstacles that you've got to crush and get focused on? Um, for me personally, it's learning, still learning, and still cutting through this idea that no man is an island. Because I had to become self-sufficient early on, right, in order to survive, right, on the streets, beating up the other kids before they try to beat me up in order to, make my presence known and say, mess with me, it's not going to be easy. Um, but I've always tried to do things on my own, thinking that that was the way to do it, and I've rarely let people in to help me. And as a result, I don't think that I've had the success that I've uh, considered that I should have by now in terms of where I should be with my speaking career, with my writing, and those kinds of things, because I'm trying to do it all myself. And so that for me is the biggest obstacle is getting out of my own way because I don't know everything. I know a lot and I'm pretty smart, but I don't know everything. And so shutting people out. from allowing them the experience to serve me, right?
Mm,
I'm always in of the point of view that, no, I'm here to serve you. How can I help you? And I do, right? And I have all these different talents and skills that I can use to help people. When I first started dating, who is now my wife, and we would go to networking events together in Dallas, where we were living at the time. And she became frustrated because she said, "I don't know how to introduce you. When I'm meeting someone and I want to introduce you, I don't know whether I should say you're a lawyer, you're an artist, you're a musician, you're a photographer, you're a speaker, coach, or I don't know. So help me." And I said, "Honey, I can't help you." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Because it always depends. In other words, how you introduce me will always depend on what the other person's needs are,
hmm.
right? In other words, if we're talking to a realtor and he or she is frustrated because of the lack of sales or their inability to make a difference in the marketplace and those kinds of things, I don't want to be introduced as a photographer, right?
Right.
Or as a former police officer or Marine. It's got doesn't relate to them. But how about as a business coach that could help them with their whatever, or a
Yeah.
communication expert that could help them improve their sales language and how to really connect with people using their words and their body language, right? That I can help with, and that would create interest between me and them. Whereas this is why you go to networking meetings and you shake hands with someone and say, "So, what do you do?" Which is a terrible question, by the way. And they say something that's completely unrelated or disinteresting to you and say, "Oh, okay, cool. All right. Oh, listen, is that Pat over there?
Yeah.
Sorry, I gotta go."
Yeah.
Right? Have you had that experience?
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is why I'm grateful to have the opportunities to develop these different areas of career and life so that I could serve more people. But yeah, to get back to the answer to your question, that is still my biggest challenge. That and figuring out this whole marketing thing, right? I know law, I know trial work, I know police work, I know photography, I know singing and writing. But man, this marketing thing is like which platform, how often, what time of day, what do you say, how long? There's 100,000 different experts on this subject that every day are telling me, no, YouTube's stupid. You got to do it on Facebook. No, Facebook sucks. You got to do it on LinkedIn. No,
Yeah.
don't do any of those. You got to do it on X or whatever. And it's frustrating to try and figure that out, but we're plowing through it.
Yeah. And that actually, yeah, and we kind of share that, and because of our backgrounds and how we were raised and everything, that I think for a lot of people and especially men is you have been raised, and it's a generational thing, but it always seems to be the one lesson that goes from generation to generation is the worst advice you could ever get is if you want something done right, do it yourself. And that creates so many obstacles, diverting down different paths, rabbit holes, whatever you want to call it, is because we have been conditioned that if you want something done right, do it yourself. And that takes away from building relationships and connections and a teamwork mindset. And everybody, teamwork makes the dream work, until you're not doing it fast enough. I'm just going to do it myself
Right.
and lead the team. And then especially if you get the positional leadership, you get the bars, stars, or stripes, or you're the foreman or the supervisor, and then that goes right along with that is if you want it done right, do it yourself. And then we have this leadership mantras that are out there like lead from the front, and different things. And I had a lieutenant tell me this when I was a sergeant, when he did his evaluation of me. He goes, "Pat, you are not a desk jockey. As a patrol sergeant, you're not waiting in your office and being lazy. You're out there with your troops, and you think you're leading by example." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're not. it's good you're out there, but there's a fine line between leading by example and doing somebody else's job for them. And that's your leading by example is you're conditioning your officers. Hey, Sergeant Welsh is just going to be out here on my beat, and shagging calls and making traffic stops and doing proactive policing. I don't need to because Sergeant Welsh is going to do it. And I did. He goes, Pat, you've written more tickets and made more arrests as the sergeant than some of your officers have made in the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing their job for them. And those are very realistic obstacles that we face. And we're in that geriatric crowd, and we're still learning how to overcome those. So I think that's encouraging and enlightening for the younger audience folks, and even the middle age ones that they're facing those kind of obstacles, and there's hope out there. Which kind of brings me to this is how can people, because you're doing the business coaching, you're doing the life coaching and the speaking, how can people get a hold of you and pick your brain more or bring you in to put on some training or speaking at one of their events?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. What I would first like for them to do is to contact you. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening and you want to get a hold of me, what I would recommend is you contact Mr. Pat Welsh. And first of all, thank him for producing this show for you on which you and I met. Because had it not been for Pat, you wouldn't want to be getting a hold of me. Maybe you'd have to find me some other way. So thank him for producing his show, because as I said earlier, it takes a lot of time, dedication, and talent and resources that he could probably be using somewhere else, but he's using this time to bring this information to you, not just from me, but other beautiful guests that he has had and that will have. And so you can ask Pat how to get a hold of me, because as it turns out, we're neighbors now. We're just like 20 minutes down the road from each other, and we're going to be seeing each other personally here really soon. And for those of you that try and reach out to Pat, but he's so busy and inundated with phone calls and emails from other people, you can find me on where I hang out mostly is Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and just go to Stevie G Success, Stevie G Success. And that's also the name of my website, steviegsuccess.com. Go to the resources page there, because I don't require emails or phone numbers or chocolate chip cookies that you send me or anything else. Just go to the resources page, and I've got information for you, audios that you can download and listen to, and it'll allow us to just get to know each other a little bit more, and you're going to learn more about how I might be able to serve you. But if you're looking for your team to develop or yourself to develop in communications, relationships, or self-mastery, I'm your guy.
Awesome. That is great. Any last words? If best piece of advice, whatever. Last word.
Yeah. You had mentioned in the beginning that you wanted me to leave the audience with something important, and you mentioned one of the things, which is when we were talking about people's identities and they're identifying as their career or their job. I am this, I am that. They say, oh, who are you? What do you do? Well, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a police officer, whatever. And I'm like, no, that's what you do, right? But it's not who you are. Who you are is a completely different person than the role that you've adopted to make money. And what I want to make clear to you is that a lot of people might be listening saying, well, that's what I do and that's my purpose. No, your purpose is the same as my purpose. It's the same as Pat's purpose. It's the same as Pat's wife's purpose. It's the same as everybody else's purpose. And that is, we are here to serve one another. You've simply chosen to serve as a realtor, lawyer, chef, waiter, car wash attendant, business owner, AI agent, whatever it is your chosen career or job. That's how you've chosen to serve. But when you look at it, whatever it is that you do, you need You do it for other people, right? Clients, customers, right? Um, so that's how you serve. So when you reframe that little bit of information, you realize that your identity does not have to be wrapped up in what you do. You are much more, and you are built for so much more than you give yourself credit for. So go out and find your real self, and then you'll see real fulfillment in your life.
Awesome. Steve, thank you so much. We'll be getting this out. It'll be dropping next week. And man, it's great to have you on board. And yes, we're only about 20, 30 minutes apart. So we're going to break bread and have further discussions because you have a lot to offer.
Awesome,
And
brother. As do you, and we look forward to meeting Marilyn as well.
yeah, well, thank you. And we look forward to meeting your wife. So, hey, for our audience, as I try to close out every episode, is to remind everybody always strive to do the right thing at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons, because that's what warrior servants and leaders do. And if this episode touched you and impacted you, and you know somebody that needs to hear that same energizing message, please share this episode with them and reach out to Steve or reach out to me. And the best way to do that is through the podcast. So it's the Warrior Servant Leader Podcast.com. Love y'all and see you next week.